Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jonay. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so happy that you joined this video today. So I'm currently doing, I don't know if it's well, it is an acronym, but I don't know if it's DISC training or DISK training. Well, my company is calling it a training because we're gonna go through it in person next week. But I just took the assessment online and it seemed like it's like a personality test. It was pretty straightforward. And I actually had some fun doing it because it was interesting to see at the end, it shows everyone's results throughout your company. And it was interesting to click on the different job titles to compare my chart with theirs. I did leadership and then I went through different people in marketing to compare our personality, our charts. And then I went through people in sales and IT just because I was interested to see if there were any patterns across the characteristics of people that work in certain industries. I don't know. That's at least what I was doing. And so I'll try to share my results. Hopefully it'll focus. I don't know. So it says, Jonay, you have... So it says, Jonay. Who's calling me? Oh, my coworker. One sec.
Hello, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. I was going to say that you complimented Cindy on how the signs have looked today.
Who did?
That she's overall marketing.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think some small things were moved around. And I was like, ooh, I wonder.
Nice.
That's exciting because it looks really good. It looks so different compared to a few weeks ago.
For sure. Did you get my email about that one lady that's coming in?
Yes. I just finished putting her folder together, actually.
I'm not quite sure, but it's definitely something I can ask. All right.
Cool. I will give you a call and let you know how it goes once they come.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Bye.
Back to the DISC training. So it says that I have an ID style. This means you're probably confident and high energy, enthusiastic about opportunities, and innovative to connect. I don't know if it's gonna focus, but this is what my chart looks like. If you've ever taken the assessment, you know what you're looking at. And this is what I did. I went to compare with a colleague, and I guess I probably shouldn't share their names and stuff. I'll try to blur it out, but it has everyone at my company, and you can filter it by department. And so that's what I've been doing, sitting here going through all of that. And I definitely want to learn more about my own ID style. So I'm going to go through and read all of this because it's all about me. And then there's also the ID Style podcast. So I'm going to go and take notes on what the little survey says about me. I'll play a little bit of the DISC ID Style podcast, but landscaping's outside and I do have a customer coming pretty soon. So I'll insert some clips if you're interested to stay and listen to see what it's like, but I'm going to sit here and I'm going to take notes on important things that it says about me.
The following podcast by Dr. Mark Sculler describes the ID style. It is an Everything Disc production brought to you by Wiley.
All right, so we're going to spend some time talking about the ID style. And if you have an ID style, I think one of the things that you're going to find is that roughly maybe 70, 80% of what we're going to talk about will fit for you here. Maybe less, maybe more. Some of it will be spot on, and then there's going to be parts that feel a little bit like, well, that's not really me. But I think the value here is more about listening for those insights that really help you make sense of your past experiences, or really help you see your thought processes and habits in a new light. But if we take a broad look at all of these different characteristics that we'll talk about within the ID style, things like being adventurous and dynamic and animated, there are a few underlying needs that really tie them together. And the first is this strong need for stimulation, especially relative to the average person. And so for people with this style, their brains are particularly tuned into the rewards within the environment. You know, two people can walk into the same exact social gathering, and one sees all of the things that could go wrong, the potential threats for embarrassment, the potential for awkwardness. And then the other person, they see all of the potential rewards that they could get out of doing things right. And someone with the ID style, they fall in this second group. They're focused on all of the potential upsides in a given situation or a given opportunity. There's also this kind of strong need in this style for what psychologists call personal agency. And personal agency, it's this kind of drive to control my own fate or to have the power to shape my environment, to move around freely under my own volition, to be free to initiate new projects or to jump on new opportunities as I see fit, rather than being constrained by the rules or the external forces. You can think of personal agency as having the freedom and power to act. And the need for agency is particularly pronounced with people with the ID style. And we'll talk about this in a little bit more depth later on. And then a final need that I want to mention is a need for expression, a need to externalize the thoughts and emotions that are tumbling around in my brain. And not only to get those ideas out there, but to have those ideas heard and acknowledged by another human being. The need I'll start with is stimulation. And the ID style, generally speaking, it has a pretty high activity level, very energetic. And there's probably a pretty big biological component to this, but on a behavioral level, people with this style, they tend to be very quick thinkers and very quick talkers. Often other people actually have trouble keeping up, especially in logical arguments. This style has kind of a strong bias towards action. They're great at maintaining forward momentum, either for themselves individually or even for a group. And one of the major assets they actually bring to the table in this area is this propensity to initiate, to be the agent of change. They have a kind of a rare self-starting capability. And this really does, it ties back to this strong need for stimulation, for change, for growth, for something different. There's a little bit of a restlessness, scanning the environment for stimulation. They're simply not as stimulating. There's this person at ID style that says, I go next. They don't have to consciously tell themselves to be on the lookout. They just are. And so when you combine this opportunity seeking with a passion for persuading and with an overwhelming confidence in their eventual success, which are characteristics of this style, we see a person who really gets projects moving. Like I mentioned before, kind of a change agent. And we'll get back to these areas of persuasion and confidence in just a little bit. But I still want to flesh out this need for stimulation, because if you have this style, I think it's really easy to underestimate just how different other people can be from you in this regard. And we do have some reason to believe that there are certain hormonal or structural differences in our brain that actually do make some people more focused on potential rewards in a given situation rather than the potential dangers or threats in that situation. And of course, some people are more wired to avoid threats at all costs, and they pay very little attention to the benefits of acting. These people put more of a premium on stability in their lives. Routine isn't such a bad thing for them. On the other hand, if I have an ID style, I probably have a more constant need for variety. I get bored with the same old. There isn't as much satisfaction in making steady, slow progress compared to the prospect of a nice big score, making a big, sudden advance. I like to see immediate progress in whatever I'm doing. And of course, everybody likes to see progress, but I probably have a stronger need for that immediate gratification if I'm going to feel like my time and my energy is being well spent. And so I'm going to lean towards tasks that give me that immediate gratification. This is where you're going to see my passion. But there is still that other stuff, the stuff that doesn't return immediate gratification, which is, for the most part, for the average person with this style, is probably going to be less appealing. For instance, take analysis, heavy, in-depth analysis. This is the process of really digging down into a topic, looking at it to really thoroughly understand an issue, even when the answers don't come that easily, even through the frustration of not understanding, feeling lost and confused, and your brain is telling you to quit because there has to be something, anything that could be more fun that I could be doing with my time than doing this analysis. It's when the bursts of gratification are the opposite of immediate. The gains are really slow and painfully earned, which really aren't all that appealing if you're someone that has a really high need for quick rewards. Now, to be clear, this style definitely does have a great deal of internal drive, but that drive is usually much more geared towards the new and novel and exciting compared to goals that involve more slow, thankless work. The goals that require keeping up that resolve and tenacity to keep pushing, even slogging through when the task is inherently not that enjoyable. And there are other people that actually don't have as much trouble with this stuff because their focus isn't on reward or stimulation, it's more on stability, it's on securing their world. And so the absence of immediate gratification, it's not as much of a deterrent. But back to the ID style, if this is your style, you may very well have a little trouble tending to the details or focusing on maintenance compared to progress. And by maintenance, making sure that the old stuff is working the way it's supposed to, doing the routine updates, organizing records, documenting things, fixing stuff that's worn out. Maintenance stuff, it's not sexy. In fact, the people who actually do enjoy this kind of stuff, they're oftentimes the people who really crave stability. And maintenance, that ensures that things will continue to run smoothly. And there's some satisfaction then in getting it done. But for the ID style, progress is what's exciting. New is what's exciting. But now I want to take this a little bit further and get at what drives this need for stimulation, along with these needs for personal agency and expression. One of the things that I think people find very useful in DISC is understanding some of the underlying belief systems that are sometimes associated with the different styles. For people with the S, which is the steadiness style, there's often this underlying belief that I have to keep other people happy. For people with the C style, sometimes you see this kind of unconscious belief that says, if I can't do something perfectly, I shouldn't do it at all. And you can imagine if someone has that underlying belief system, it can have a really powerful impact on how they live their lives. And for the ID style, as you might imagine, the beliefs, they're going to be quite a bit different. Here you have a more, what's called kind of an expansionist mindset. The belief, the assumption is that I should always be expanding, growing, thriving upwards and outwards. And if I'm not doing these things, if I'm stagnated or if I'm staying in the same place, I'm doing something wrong. I'm squandering my time, my chances, my opportunities. There can be this kind of unspoken assumption that I should be making progress at all times. Again, there's a restlessness. When confronted with quiet, the brain is telling me, you're wasting time if you're not accomplishing something. Then it might not necessarily be obvious to me that other people don't share this constant sense of pressure that I'm putting on myself. And this feeds into one of those fundamental needs that we talked about at the beginning, the need for agency. The ID style has a really strong dislike for being constrained. They need and they prize their freedom. They tend to see a big, wide open world in comparison to other people they're probably much more likely to put these artificial psychological constraints on what they can or can't do. For the style we're talking about here, though, the act of exploring the world, that is central to their enjoyment of life. And so if you have someone who has this really high need for stimulation and you combine it with someone who has a really high level of self-confidence, what you're going to have is someone who's pretty spontaneous. There's a belief that they're going to be able to competently adapt to any emerging situations that come up. They're willing to improvise on the spot. It's a mental outlook that's much more focused on the rewards of success than it is on the consequences and the shame that's associated with failure. Whereas for the majority of people don't want to be put in a position where they're going to have to improvise, the ID style, not all of them, but oftentimes people with this style, they see as an opportunity. And it's definitely a cliche, but there really is this instinctive ability to look at problems as opportunities. And this is really an absolute gift for them, especially in the workplace. There's an awful lot of pressure in almost any work setting to not take too many risks. But at the same time, when we look at our own research, at the feedback that people give to leaders in organizations, the number one piece of feedback that we find that people give is for them to be more active about pushing boundaries. People actually, they sense this strong need for boldness in their leaders at work. And routinely, the DI and the ID styles, they're the ones who get the highest marks for doing this. These folks actually are much more willing to take risks on tasks, but also on social risks, putting themselves out there, exposing themselves to criticism or failure, much more so than the average person. And again, a big part of this is really about being more attentive to the rewards than it is to the threats. So leaders with this style, they often are willing to take those big risks. But on the other hand, an area where they tend to get lower marks is about being attentive to their followers' needs, particularly the need for security. They don't always recognize when other people are having difficulty with rapid change. These leaders may often change direction really easily as they see fit, as they see the need arise, often enjoying the excitement that comes along with this. But for other people who are following them, oftentimes, they can find this really disconcerting and stressful and not really what they're after in a job. There are genuinely lots and lots of really good, valuable people who care much more about security and stability than they care about adventure. The ID style also has a much less negative reaction to external pressure than the average person. Not to say they don't feel any pressure, but less pressure. A lot of people, for instance, they'll structure their day and put in a lot of preemptive effort because they want to avoid finding themselves in high pressure situations. But the DI or ID style actually perceive pressure and challenge in a lot of respects positive, as stimulating, as exciting. And so if I'm someone who's really attentive to rewards, I probably want to get those rewards as quickly as possible. And one of the ways to do that is through shortcuts, looking at the normal rules and processes, and sometimes seeing myself as an exception, almost seeing myself as exempt from those. Not officially exempt, but I know what I'm doing, and it's all for the best, so we can skip this step and not really slow ourselves down with all this formal stuff. Really kind of looking at the loosest possible interpretation of the rules to allow me to do what I want. And oftentimes, I get away with it because I deliver results. And to be honest, in some cases, that ability to cut through red tape and that exemption from the normal rules on a psychological level, that, I'm honest with myself, that can add a sense of power and control. Maybe even a little bit of a boost for the old ego. And generally speaking, people with this ID style, more so than others, they really are more likely to trust their instinct, their judgment.
The following
power and control. Maybe even a little bit of a boost for the old ego. And generally speaking, people with this ID style, more so than others, they really are more likely to trust instinct, their judgment to make the right decision when the time comes, to sense that they have a general feel for the big picture at all times, that they have a general sense of where things should go, a gut instinct of how things should move. And so they're willing to step in and intervene when they see something out of line with their vision. They're fine playing it by ear, keeping track of things in their head and jumping in to address problems, oftentimes with this expert self-assurance, even if they haven't necessarily taken the time to explore the complexity of the problem. It's not entirely uncommon to see an overconfidence in their ability to handle otherwise sophisticated problems without necessarily doing a whole lot of homework and analysis beforehand. There can be almost a belief in a certain kind of specialness about myself that allows me to glance at a problem and immediately see the solution that's evaded others. And because I want to move fast, I want an immediate reward, I might gloss over the details that don't necessarily fit with my hypothesis, with how I want to see the world. And once I've brushed off the contradicting details out of the picture, the solution I've come up with, it feels spot on. It seems like it's a perfect fit, almost extremely elegant, because again, the intricacies that don't necessarily fit within my vision, well, I've kind of pushed those to the side. But of course, there is also a real advantage to this general quickness, mental quickness. And one of those is being a really quick read on people, because this style really is a blend of a strong goal focus and a strong people focus. And so when you combine these two, what you get is someone who's really tuned in to other people's motives and needs and almost instinctively recognizes what other people want out of a situation, and then can use that information to connect with those other people and persuade them, to show someone from their own perspective why they should believe in my goal or my opinion or my vision. And at the extreme, you can sometimes even see the ability to create needs in other people, kind of awakening people to possibilities, maybe a cool opportunity or a promotion or a recognition. This is part of the art of persuasion, and that challenge of bringing someone along and getting them excited and invested, that's really enjoyable to a lot of people with this style. But there is a flip side to this. If I've got this ID style and I get people enthused about some goal or opportunity, people are going to feel used if they sense that they were really just a means to an end for me. If I engage with this person and show interest for the sake of bringing them along with my vision, and then my interest kind of drops off a cliff when the other person's on board, or when the goal's been accomplished, or when something else captures my interest instead, they're going to feel a little bit manipulated. They're going to wonder if I'm not quite as sincere as I initially came across, because I may very well have the skills to connect with someone and understand their motives or needs or interests. But if it becomes clear that I was only interested in my goal or my vision all along, well, understandably, there's going to be some resentment there. Now, this is most likely to be a danger if I'm in a position of influence, oftentimes a leadership position. And I think one of the things it ties back to is this tendency to be expedient, wanting to move things quickly, wanting to see results, and focusing a lot more on the ends rather than the means. And I think in a leadership position, the ID leaders can sometimes overlook the fact that for a lot of people, their enjoyment out of work, that actually does come from the means, or it comes from the process of doing the work, as much as it comes from the end result. For instance, for a lot of people, their enjoyment in their jobs is about perfecting their work, getting closure on a job well done, dotting the I's and whatnot. And so if the leader has this very expedient approach to the work that a team is doing, if they have this good enough perspective, these other people aren't really going to feel like they're getting their needs met. They're going to wonder if their contributions even really matter. And even more than that, if I've got this appetite for constant progress and relatively little interest in maintenance, there's a good chance that our processes are going to get ignored as a group, and that I'm not going to take the time to optimize our processes and systems because that work can kind of feel dull. And so you get a lot of inefficiencies here. And that really can be demoralizing for people, particularly for the type of people I was just describing. If they see that a high percentage of their efforts are going to waste or are being squandered, what you're going to get is you're going to get a lot more burnout. The lack of a tight organization, it really does have an effect on the culture and the morale, particularly the people who care about quality. They're going to stop taking as much pride in their work. Their purpose for doing a good job, it fades. And so, whereas in the mind of the ID leader, the purpose is to just keep moving forward at lightning speed, for others, it can feel like they're just putting in more meaningless work. But enough about leadership for right now. And there really are a lot of amazing skills that the ID style brings to that role, but I will touch on that later. I do want to touch on a topic, though, that's often associated with leadership, which is confidence. It's very much related to this idea of personal agency that I introduced at the beginning. The ID style tends to have very high sense of self-efficacy. And this is a term of art in psychology. It means an underlying belief that I can shape my world. If someone has high self-efficacy, they look at a difficult task as a challenge, as something they can master, versus seeing it as a danger that needs to be avoided. You can contrast that to someone who has, for instance, low self-efficacy. When they're faced with a difficult task, they tend to focus on what they lack or on all the different ways that they could fail. And so as a result, there tends to be less ambition, more of a willingness to give up. Basically, the ID style really tends to give themselves the benefit of the doubt, to believe that they can do it. They also often report having a strong vision of how things should be done. They feel like they see things very clearly in their heads. But again, sometimes this does involve unknowingly glossing over all the, quotes, small, insignificant stuff. And as a result, they can sometimes have a false sense of how smoothly things are planned out. They think things are planned out really well, but in reality, they aren't planned out quite that well. And this kind of absolves them from the need to go in and work out the specific processes. That is, because things seem so clear, they don't really feel that nagging sense that more structure and more processes are needed before they move forward. Things feel kind of tightened up, even when other people, outside people, might describe them as being very loose and undefined. And you also sometimes see some exaggeration. It's not necessarily intentional exaggeration. More often than not, they've really bought into what they're describing, and they can replay their passion.
Well, that was pretty good. I feel like I got some pretty good notes on characteristics on my ID style or my DISC style. I don't know what you would call it, but I do think I got some pretty good notes. I need to go prepare for a meeting, and I will probably get back to this later. I'm super excited to learn more about myself. I do think that that is something that I'm more passionate about at my 25, 26 era of life. I'm really into learning who I am as a person, what triggers me, how to have more emotional control, and even how to read other people's body language, how to be more in tune and aware of how the things that I say affect other people and how other people react to things that I say, being more self-aware of my presence and all of those things. And I will continue to bring you all along this journey with me to continue to evolve as a young woman. And if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you for watching. I will see you all in the next video. Bye. See you later.